Hello, welcome to day 1 of 21-day SQL Query Challenge. This is question number 4 of day 1. We will be trying to solve at least 5 SQL query every day so that by the end of this challenge, we will be solving 21 into 5, that is 105 SQL queries, which will definitely help you crack any SQL interview. So, this question is taken from LeetCode and the question is based on article views. So the question has a table called views and the column names are article, which is an integer data type, author, again an integer data type, viewer ID, an integer data type, and view date, which is a date data type. So article ID is basically the ID of an article that is being published. Author ID is the ID of the author who has written the article, and viewer ID is the ID of the person who has viewed the article, and view date says on which date that person has viewed the article. Now, the one speciality of this table is that this table doesn't have any primary key, which means there is no column that has unique values. Okay, now is it possible to have columns that doesn't have primary key? Yes, it is possible when these types of tables come into play, that is viewership type of uh, tables are there. They usually don't have a primary key. Let's see it with an example. So if you see this view table, it has article ID, author ID, viewer ID, and view date. So if you see, one particular article can be viewed by many, right? So every time someone views it, the data is being recorded, which means it is not possible to have a unique ID for article ID. Similarly, if you look at the author who has written the article, one particular author can write n number of article and his article can be viewed many times by different viewers, right? So it can repeat itself every time his article is viewed, or every time he publishes a different article, right? So it is also not going to be a primary key. Now if you look at viewer ID, same person who views one article can view another article as well. So every time he views one article, that data is being recorded. So it is not possible to have unique or non-duplicate values, right? So this is also not a primary key. Now view date, in one particular date itself, many people can view a particular article or different articles, right? So view date can also be technically not primary key because it can duplicate itself. So this is a example wherein a table doesn't have any primary key, and it is possible to have tables which doesn't have primary keys. Usually it happens in viewship kind of data. Okay, so let's now understand what the question is. So the question says, write a solution to find all the authors that have viewed at least one of their own article. Return the result that table sorted by ID in ascending order. So let's go through the steps. So first step is what you need to display or execute. If you read the question, it says you need to find all the authors. So you have to get the author detail. So if you look at the column, article ID is there, author ID is there, viewer ID is there, and view date is there. From these 4 columns, you can only fetch author details from author ID column. So we will use author ID, and what is to be done with author ID? You need to fetch it. So we will use select statement. You're not creating or deleting. So we'll only use select statement. Now, let's move on to the third step directly. What is the condition? Is there any condition? Yes, there is a condition that the viewed at least one of their own articles. So the authors that viewed at least one of their own article. For now, let's remove this at least one and just write it as authors who viewed their own article. This is just for your understanding. So we'll remove this, and the first condition is that authors that viewed their own article. What does that mean? So if the author has viewed their own article, it means that the viewer ID and the author ID would be the same, right? So if, let's say, there is author 3, this author is reading his own article, then this viewer ID will also become 3, right? That is when the author is reading his own article. So this condition means the author ID should be equal to viewer ID. This is what the condition, the first condition says. Now, there is one more condition, at least one. What does this mean? At least one. Whenever there is something like at least one, at least two, or at least some value, it means that you are trying to find, or you're trying to group it. Okay, so whenever this word comes, you should understand that you are trying to group the items and get one particular person's value. Okay, I'll explain this to you in detail when we are writing the code, but for now just understand that when at least comes, it means that you are trying to group the column. Okay, at least one of their own article, something like that. If it is equal to a number, like if it says at least 20,000 or 30,000, in that case you are referring to the value inside the column, then you don't have to use group by. But when you are referring to at least the column name, so here you are saying at least one of their own article. So this article is a article ID, right? It is a column. It is not specifically a value that is given in the column. So that time we will have to use group by. Okay, I'll tell you how exactly this works. So in this there are two conditions to be applied. One is author ID should be equal to viewer ID, and then you also have to group by. Now, and then it also says you have to sort it in ascending order. So whenever there is sorting, that is another condition, order by. Order by is another condition. Okay, so there is three condition. Order by. How do we have to order by? We have to order by ID. What ID? Author ID. It's in ascending, so you just don't have to write anything. Okay, so now let's go to the second step, that is from where do we get this data? We get this data from the table views. So now that we have found everything that is required for writing the query, let's try and write the query. So when I'm writing the query, you will get a clearer picture of why group by is required. So let's start. Select author ID, from views table, where author ID equal to viewer ID. Suppose that since we are not familiar with group by, or we are not understanding why exactly group by is to be used, we will do it without using group by and then see what happens with group by and without group by. Okay, so where author ID is equal to viewer ID and order by author ID. So if we write all these and execute, what is happening is that you are getting 3 instances. So why are you getting 3 instances? So let's see what is actually happening. So if you look at this table here in this row, what is happening? The author ID and viewer ID is becoming equal. So you're getting 7 as one output. Okay, and then if you look at this row here also, what is happening? The author ID and the viewer ID is becoming equal, and in the last row as well, the author ID and the viewer ID is becoming equal, which means the same author has clicked or viewed his article twice. So 2 times the same person's ID is being repeated. But we don't want every instance. We just want if the author has at least viewed it once, that's enough. You only have to get the author ID. You don't have to get how many times the author has viewed, or every instance when the author has viewed his own article. Okay, so that is not required. You only required the author IDs. Whoever has viewed at least once, you need to get that ID. That's it. You don't have to find how many times they have viewed their own article. Okay, so for this reason we have to group it. So if we group it using author ID, what will happen is that even if the author has viewed it 2 times or 3 times or n number of times, still it will be counted as one column or one row only, and once only the author ID will be recorded. Okay, so that is the reason why we are using group by. So group by author ID. So you don't have to get it n number of times, get the instance n number of times. So if it is happening once also, you only have to get the result once. That's it. Okay, so whenever there is counting of a particular column name or column heading as such required, then we will use group by. So if it was at least one of a given value inside the column, you don't have to use group by. You will use greater than or equal to sign like we used in the previous queries. But if it is not a value inside a column, rather if it is a column itself that is to be measured, then you will use group by. Okay, now we will run it and see. Sorry, not group by, author ID. Group by author ID, and you need to get the IDs of the article. You need to get it as IDs. So it should be as ID. Okay, the output should be as ID and not author ID. Now if you run it, you're getting it. So this is how you will solve this question. It's a bit tricky, but now I hope you have understood where to use group by and what will happen if we don't use group by. Okay, now we will solve one more question for day 1 and wind off day 1. I hope this series is helping you. Thank you.